Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Quantum Living Conversations. I'm Deirdre Catlin, and I'm re-recording the opening of my interview with Emily Farish because my microphone is rubbing all over a necklace I was wearing. So I hope throughout the rest of the recording it doesn't bother you too much. I think I was pretty still, but it bothered me on the first few minutes when I was re-listening to it. So welcome to another conversation. This is number 2 in a 3-part series on how we can better take care of our bodies in a way we can support our overall health with the physical aspect of taking care of our bodies through nutrition, through ways of alleviating pain, and then the third one will be on the holistic approach. And so today, I'd like to introduce you to Emily Farish of Emily Farish Acupuncture. And I was introduced to her through a bunch of people told me that I should meet her, and happened to meet her where she was giving a lecture on what she does, holistic medicine, acupuncture, and the introduction or the ability to use Chinese herbs with the overall approach to health and certain systems in our bodies. And I just love the language that she used. I loved how she was able to simply take the knowledge and wisdom of the Eastern medicine and blend it together with some of her experiences with Western medicine. And so I was super excited to work with her myself, and I just love the fact that for veterans and other insurance companies and stuff out there, that they're opening themselves up to things like acupuncture and as a way for an alternative to pain relief and ways to improve our health. And it was super exciting to me because I was curious about it. I had many friends who helped with, anxiety and sleepless nights and just feeling better. And so I was excited to work with Emily. And I mean, you have such a cool story of how you got to where you are now that I will just let you run with it and introduce yourself.
So thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your forum discussion and for, how reaching out to people. So I think this is a time where everyone wants to reach out and to, connect and to say, hi, I'm here, even though I might be, self-isolating in the world, or this and that at home or wherever. People still want to connect with people. So thank you for providing this forum and for this opportunity. So my name is Emily Farish, as you have said. I'm a licensed acupuncturist and practitioner of Chinese herbal medicine. I'm not a doctor, but I am a licensed, so depending on where you practice, and depending on the state, there's, different titles. So in Washington State, I'm an East Asian medical practitioner. But in California, you might be a licensed acupuncturist, but no, I'm not a doctor, but I do love what I do. And so, how I fell in love with Chinese medicine was, it's kind of like in life where you're like, wow, I can't believe that this happened. And yet it led me to another transition. And so I was in this car accident. This was my, I would say my mid-20s, early mid-20s. And then I also, shortly thereafter, I was mugged at gunpoint. And so it was these 2 major tragic events, that my body, I guess you say your mind and spirit, was just in total chaos. So for example, I had never really experienced PTSD before, but I knew the effects. For example, at night, it was just this physiological, it was like a stop. I couldn't go out at night and I could feel it. It was almost like having, a panic attack. And it happened for several months, and until I was getting my master's in health education at the time. So I'd always been going in the route of health, and I didn't know, okay, after this, am I going to go to nursing school or go to, you know, Western medicine school, like become a doctor, MD, or another route. So I was in my class, and a colleague said, you know, you might want to try acupuncture. And I'd heard about it, you know, I hadn't had an experience with it. And because she knew the trouble that I was having, you know, it was a physiological sensation. I could not go out at night. I would start to panic, you know, because it happened to me at night. I should have said that before. And she said, you know, and you're also in you're having all this pain. So I believe that pain sometimes is not separate. You know, there's the physical component, but also a lot of people, they've even said statistically they might feel depressed, they might feel anxious because of their pain, because it limits them to do the things that they before, you know, they could do, but now they can't. And so there's a whole piece in how multi-layered pain can manifest for a person.
Yep.
So I received a treatment, and it wasn't this, oh, I'm going to practice acupuncture now, everything, you know, I'm done, this and that. I just knew, you know, after that treatment that something had really changed for me. And it was like the trauma was also helping to leave my body physically. And it could also be because when you're also in a car accident, you know, your brain basically tells your body to basically adhere to that position. So some people might have a lot more tension on one side, depending on if the impact was on the opposite, you know, so the nervous system will learn, oh, I've had this trauma and that's normal for me. So there is a process of unwinding from the physical pain as well. But also it's very scary to be in an accident, you know, or also to have, you know, a gun pointed at your head. It's really scary. So, and because Chinese medicine doesn't separate the mind from the body because it's in the same cavity. We are walking in a body, right, that also has a brain, a beautiful brain. And we have neurotransmitters that govern how we feel. We have chemical messengers that talk about more inflammation or less inflammation. And so Chinese medicine always honored and said all the things that you've been through in your life can also play a role with how your body communicates, or how your neurotransmitters, how your cells communicate. And I think there's the whole branch of mind-body medicine, you know, that really does talk about that. For example, Deepak Chopra, you know, in the 90s and also in the early 2000s also came out with some really wonderful books, and many other wonderful thinkers, people of Western medicine, saying, hey, there is a strong connection here. And I also feel that probably, you know, I'm not, you know, the head of the military, but looking at, for example, veteran cases where phantom limb pain, for example, they've had a limb removed, right? They had excruciating pain, and they had the limb removed, but then the person's still in that amount of pain. And so they do honor and say, there is something here with the brain also and pain. And on the flip side, there is also the potential to change that, you know, given the right, you know, conditions, right? Et cetera, et cetera. Trying to remember where I went. So yes, so I went through a treatment, and I knew at that point I wanted to do something with my hands concerning health, and I didn't necessarily want to keep writing about health. So I knew there was something more, and I didn't know what it was. I just knew there's something I'd like to do. So I thought, oh, maybe it's holistic nursing or something like that. But all I knew was that I needed to get out of the city. That is for sure.
Yep.
And so I moved. I was living in the Bay Area at the time, so I moved north, and I went to Western Herbal Medicine School for a year, which was wonderful. And then I got a job working for an acupuncturist. You know, it's just this amazing, like, just synchronicity of just everything just kind of lining up. So I worked for him for a year, and I remember looking at all the, you know, Chinese herbs and saying, how do you pronounce that? It was just, you know, I had no idea. If someone came in, I was like kind of panicked, like, what, you know, because, you know, there's the pinyin, you know, of Chinese, and, you know, which you can read in English, but it doesn't have the tones associated with it. So I didn't know, but eventually, you know, they became more familiar than that. So I worked for him in his clinic, and then, and then about a year into it, he said to me, I think you should really get your license. And he said, you should stop getting all these certificates. You should just really go get it. And so Santa Cruz, California was the closest that I could think of that was close to where I'm from, that I didn't really want to be in a city. And I just felt more, I don't know, it just felt better for me to be there. And I was already in California anyway. And at that point in time with California's licensing, you were considered primary care, and different than other states, you're practicing as a licensed acupuncturist. I don't know if now, I think that's still the case, but I'm not practicing there, so I don't know. So I wanted to have, choose a school that had, that was very, heavy in Western sciences, this and that. And I had some prerequisites already. So I went through that course, and that was 6 years full time, which most people don't know that. They think you just go and, I mean, I don't know what they know, but they generally don't think that it takes that long. And so then I passed my boards. And at that point, it was a very difficult passing rate in California. And it was very, very stressful. But I took there's national certifications, and then that you take, there's 5 exams. And then, but California has its own exam, I think it was like 7 or 8 hours. And I will never give up my license in California because of that. Because I will pay them every 2 years through all the continuing education, but I'm never giving it up because of the experience, Yep. I just was like, nope, I don't know. When you have like sweat and tears into something that you prepared so hard for, and it's this one moment, and you're like, and it's only twice a year, and if you don't make it, then, it's 6 months later, and it's
Absolutely.
stressful.
Yep.
So it was I would never give that up, never let that one go. So then in that course is that in a nutshell, and then I moved to Asia for around 2 years I was over there, but I've been going back and forth to Asia, or more specifically Southeast Asia, since I was in my teens. So my father lives over there, and I've always just loved Asia. I don't know what it is. Well, I love traveling anyway. That's a whole nother rant, but I really enjoyed living there. And so I taught, I was there, I taught a lot about Chinese medicine dietetics, food as medicine over there. I taught a lot of classes to people. So a lot of people come, from Europe, and they will have, time off, so they'll different than Americans will per se, but there were some Americans there. So I worked at a health center there, and people would, come. And so I would teach, about, Qigong exercises, which are a branch of Chinese medicine, breathing techniques, basically to reduce stress. Chinese medicine as a whole, it's this beautiful medicine that is very, very multi-layered. And so there's the acupuncture, which is just one tool. There's the Chinese herbal medicine, then there's movement therapy, and then there's tuina, or which can be taught of it's basically like massage, but it's like acupressure, but there's different kind of just rhythms to it. So I don't know if you've ever had a Thai massage,
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Wonderful experience. And it's interesting because the tuina, from Chinese medicine is somewhat similar in its rhythmic nature, but they just use different, meridians or different areas, but it's absolutely wonderful. So Chinese medicine is this just wonderful multi-layer, just body of medicine that's been around for so long. And the beauty about it is that once you become licensed in it, there's different avenues that you can really specialize in if you'd like to, And some people, they just do body work, for example, like the tuina portion. Some people, they just do the herbal medicine component. And some people do a mix of both. So in China, for example, generally speaking, you either just study the acupuncture or you just study the herbs, In the States and in Europe, I believe the licensure, and I can't really speak for Europe, but I believe it's a mix of all of them. But in China specifically, it's kind of one branch or the other. So you just will meet just an acupuncturist, like that's what they do. But the herbalist, is more considered at a tier, with the pharmacologist, for example.
Okay.
And that's the beautiful thing about the healthcare system over there, and then also in Taiwan and in parts of Japan and in parts of Thailand, but not as much. But you'll see that there's um, this kind of blend, or in the hospitals, you'll see there's the Chinese medicine side and then there's the Western medicine side, which I think is fantastic for people, because then they'll say, oh, okay, what's going on? Oh, okay, let's have you go here, and then if this doesn't work out, then we'll have you go to this department. So I really appreciate that there can be blends, in hospitals. Sometimes they're separate, but it's really wonderful to be in a environment where there is that accessibility, for people. It's not just kind of, one or the other.
Right. Well, what I like with that idea too is it's opening people up to possibilities. I mean, you're my understanding or my hope is that we're healing facilities, right? So how do we open people up for healing? And I do think with the Eastern, a lot of the Eastern philosophies, there's just a different avenue that if something's not working, like you talked about, your body is stuck holding it. How do we open that up to release the layers that need to come out?
Yes.
I'm going to digress a little bit because that was an interesting topic when you talked about travel. How has travel informed you, and what have you learned? How has that informed you? What you think about the states and the world and the relationship within the world, and
the states.
why do you like? Well, just living here, because you did go over in Asia and live for 2 years, and then it sounds like you traveled probably a lot more and exploring.
Yeah, love to travel.
What does that do for you?
Well, I love that question. I got a travel bug when I was really young, and I was fortunate enough to have parents that were very accommodating. I don't know about traveling. Traveling, obviously, maybe I'm just getting older, because, I think, well, 20 something years ago, I think the world was a much possibly different place, but I was always interested in herbal medicine. So that goes back to my grandmother, and growing up and living in an area where, for example, there's this huge garden that I grew up in. She had herbs, she knew about herbs that she, grew, and just being out in nature. So I always had just this love for appreciation of, the planet and the earth. But I also love languages. And so I always knew that I wanted to study something involving health, but I just didn't quite know what avenue it would be. And it was actually quite frustrating for quite some time. But hey, it's like, well, what is it? Well, sometimes life doesn't always work with how my brain wants it to. And you just get these experiences, and they just kind of flow with it, and it kind of happens. So when I was 17, 18, after I had graduated high school. So I'd saved money up to do some volunteer work. And so I moved to Bolivia. I joined a volunteer group, and it was basically, they had this whole herbal medicine component. So you would work with the campesinos, and you would learn, but in exchange, you'd help to build, infrastructures. It was like giving back, but then learning at the same time. And it was wonderful. And so it was same age group, there were probably about 20 people, but they're from all around the world. And so when I moved there, it was really interesting. And you stay with this family. They didn't tell me, but that part of the program, basically they fizzled out. So when I got there, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to go. I'm so excited. I'm going to learn about traditional medicine, this and that. And it's like, well, that's kind of not happening. And so obviously that's a little frustrating when you're like, I've saved for years to do this.
Right.
And so they said, so basically you're going to work in an orphanage, which I didn't mind, but it was also what I hadn't moved there to do. So, so I did that, and I don't regret it at all. It was wonderful. It was an all girls orphanage. So I was able to, because I was also immersed and I had studied Spanish before, I was also able to learn more about the traditional medicines there. And I really didn't know if it was ethnobotany that I wanted to go into, because I just loved people's relationships to plants, and how I thought it was so fascinating that you would find, in one part of the world, you would find, a particular plant, and you'd find that same plant or some sort of a derivative of that plant in another part of the world. And the people who had a connection to that plant for medicine never came in contact with one another, but they knew what it was used for. for the benefit of health. And I just found that to be fascinating. How do people know, if they didn't have a petri dish, microscope, how do they not know that, or the highly, sophisticated ways of testing the chemical constituents of the plant? How did this happen? So that was what really intrigued me. And so for college, I had studied healthcare systems, but also how people's relationship to a system. What is that system, saying about a culture and the relationship between, principles, ideals about health. So, but I didn't know that yet because this was pre-college. So I lived there for a year, came back. So that was really fascinating. So I was looking at the Evergreen State College in Washington State because they had this year-long program in traditional medicines or herbal medicines around the world. So I was at another college at the time though, and this is just funny. So then I said, I'm going to transfer to Evergreen, move to Evergreen, right, to Olympia, right? And then they said, we're not doing this program anymore. And so, it was really interesting. So, but I had a fantastic time there, right? So then I went back to the previous college, and my advisor, so I kind of transferred, wasn't working out. It was in LA. Again, cities, not my thing. So, but I went back to the LA area, and so my advisor said, you should really study in Nepal. And they had this 20-something year program, in Nepal where you live with a family and you study Buddhism and Hinduism. And then you have this month-long project, that you can do. But it's a huge immersion, because I didn't know anyone that spoke Nepali. And so they really wanted to get your language skills really up and going so that for your senior thesis or for your project, you had this immersion and you would really focus on that well with your language skills and also help with other assistants, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, okay, great, right? So then I moved to Nepal. And so I stayed with a family. This was outside of Kathmandu in a little town called Kupan. So I lived there, and then so for my project, I went up into the Annapurna Mountains, and so I stayed with various families and talked to them because in Nepal at the time, if someone got hurt or they needed medical attention, it was days before you would get to hospital. And they had 2 hospitals at the time in the country, and that was in Kathmandu. They had these maybe little itty bitty like centers that you could go to, but very, very small. So if you're way up in the mountains and you have something happen, you really need to rely on the resources that you have around you, because it could be 6 days bus ride. I mean, they didn't have freeways at the time. I haven't been there, 20-something years. So I'm sure it's much different now. So I was really excited to see, wow, they had all these really interesting belief systems in terms of how they said, no, don't sit on a, stone bench. You're going to get, something's going to happen to your stomach. There's these really interesting, and I'm translating, there's these really interesting beliefs, just like we have. There's cultures, we have belief systems that govern our connection to everything. So I was really fascinated. I loved it there. And granted, I was really sick. I was sick the entire time, and everyone else was too. And they just said, it's just it's different microbes, different bugs. Yep. So that is what launched my experience or my introduction to Tibetan medicine and Chinese medicine, because they look at the tongue. They have similar diagnostics. So does Ayurvedic medicine from India. But depending on where you live, obviously you're going to use the plants of that particular region because those are accessible to you. So I was very sick, and I had taken a course of many different Western meds that had helped, but still I was not well. So I went to this traditional Tibetan medicine doctor, and she looked at my tongue, she took my pulse, and she said, oh, okay, you really need this. I just had this bug that just could not, it was just really stubborn. So anyway, so she handed me this little, paper bag with these little, they were like rolled up little pills. I didn't know what they were, and I took them, and I felt so much better. So that was my first introduction to like Tibetan herbal medicine. And I said, well, this is I don't know what it is. I don't care. It helped me. I was just so thrilled with that. So travel for me has always been a purpose. And so when I've stayed with families, it's always been a purpose. Either I did volunteer work. So for example, I taught also at a different point in time in Thailand, I taught English, in schools. And so I always wanted to have it to serve a purpose. And for me, that was just how I just wanted to be immersed. That was it. And so I just said, well, I really would like to learn about plant medicine. And so I'm not going to, I could buy a book, but I think when I can interact with people and kind of understand how they use language and how their connection is to that plant via that language, it helps me to understand, their connection and why they use it and for what. So it was a wonderful time, and I'm glad that I'm not sick anymore. That was terrible. So
That's so cool.
I learned a lot about herbal medicine, that's for sure.
Right? Well, I mean, it brings up a couple of things. One, I think like you, I'm an experimenter. So like I learned from my experiences, okay, this works. Not quite sure how yet, but I feel better. So let's break that down. But I was wondering while you were doing this or while you were talking about this, was I was just talking with a kiddo who is a 16-year-old, and she was talking about how in school they make you decide what you're going to be, and this is the path that you are going down. And obviously I like to break rules, and I'm like, no, here's all the things you want to do. I think you could do them all at the same time. XXX. And to me, what I'm hearing is you're following your path, heart's desire, whatever a pull. You said you had a pull, but as you're telling me all these places that you've been, I'm like, how do you have the time for that? And I think it's not having that defined path, right? Like,
yeah. Well, that was during college, was Nepal. So I was that was an established program that students signed up for. And so it was kind of like, you get credit, but you study abroad.
So, but you also changed like multiple different,
two different colleges.
You opened yourself up to, okay, you know what, this is where I'm going to change. So what is in you that allows you to do that? Like,
I have no idea. It was frustrating and confusing, but and it's like, well, why couldn't I be just, no, I want to be an engineer at 18. I really wish I just knew. And I would always say to my stepdad, it's something that has to do with health, and I want to help people, but I'm just not quite sure what it is. And so it's just kind of this, and at the time I didn't know that you could practice, as a naturopathic doctor or an herbalist or an acupuncture. I wasn't necessarily exposed to people in my early teens. I just hadn't met them, so I just didn't have that kind of paradigm of, oh, there are people that do that. And so it was just this process, but I love people's connections to plants because I had them also. So I was also following things that felt very like home to me. So I just wanted to meet, oh, how did these people, what's their connection? How do they do that? And so it was just kind of following it, but I worked it in with my studies or, between college, I saved up to do it. So, I just did what I did. I just made it happen.
That's
so
awesome.
And so then it's funny because I think about my memory. What happened after that?
Right.
And so, but whenever I traveled, it was always either via, volunteer work, or there's some sort of compensation, or I just, or I was living there and had a job, or staying with a family. And, so.
Well, I love how each on that, I guess in our minds, it's a meandering path, but it's actually not. It's like, pick up a little bit here, because you do blend here in the States. You talked about you're not just an acupuncture, so you blend the herbal side as well, and tons of other experiences, that you just bring in of, oh, I was watching you walk, so let's work on your shoulder. Like, what?
Well, the beautiful part about the acupuncture piece is that it really helps it works with soft tissue so beautifully. So if someone's in a lot of pain, right, their brain or their body is going to compensate, and the brain's always going to want to go to the easiest path, right? And when pain shows up, it's because, besides a trauma, when pain comes up, it's really the brain saying, my patterns of compensation are no longer working for me. So there are other muscles or other joint systems, you know, or joints that are going to be talkative and saying ouch, right? So that's why I love acupuncture so much, is because not only does it work with the brain to emit serotonin and dopamine, all these wonderful anti-inflammatories that are released, you know, during a treatment, but depending on where you place it, you can help to change, you know, the hardening of a tissue, because you improve blood flow, you improve nutrients to muscles. And it's like anything, we all want to be supple, right? And that's as we go through life, we don't want to be you never want to be hardened. Like, you don't want your muscles to be hard, because then it limits range of motion. So it's kind of like, you look at yoga, you're like, wow, well, they also practice, but there's also a way in which you can improve the circulatory benefits to muscles. So when things are really tight, they don't allow for nutrients to come in. It's like a hose when you have a kink in it, if you think about it.
Yep.
We have to figure out, how do we get the kink out? So we allow for more circulation, more nutrients into tissue. And Chinese medicine says, you know, blood is the healer and the garbage collector. And what's in the blood really matters, so that you can nourish tissue and improve functioning. And that's what basically acupuncture is. And Chinese medicine, I mean, the herbal medicine part is you just improve functioning so that a body comes back to knowing what it's supposed to do, right? If there's inflammation here, okay, then we help to improve the nutrient there so that the inflammatory markers, you know, are no longer, you know, get moved out of that area.
Well, and it sounds like it's helping, you know, the body want to find that natural homeostasis, that balance, that the body is its own wisdom, and how can we support it?
Yes, absolutely.
I also loved how you explained pain, because, you know, it's information, right? That we try to ignore, suppress, or, you know, and I do too. I mean, I could have bought Advil. I should have stocked in it, right? Like, but I also, because I just got a treatment with you Friday, and you worked on my shoulder, like a place where I hold a lot of things. And I was so surprised throughout the day, and I guess just being reminded, because I know this, but reminded again, how much we don't realize we're holding until it's gone.
Yeah.
And I just would catch myself at the day, you know, going back to that holding place, and I'm like, no, we just released it, it's okay. But I was surprised of, like, I didn't even pay attention.
Yes, we don't know what we know. No, we know.
Right?
And if I hadn't had experiences of pain, inflammation, or all these digestive issues, I mean, who knows, maybe I would have never been exposed, you know, to this medicine, and how much it just really, really helped me. So I finally just said to myself, well, I really want to help people. This is an all-encompassing medicine. I would love to help people in this way. And there have been other modalities, other therapies that have helped me along the way as well, in my life, that I'm extremely grateful for, you know, that I still access. So I'm a firm believer that it's not that human beings, you know, in our history have come up with tools to help us live a healthier and happier life. And they're around for a reason. And so Chinese medicine is one piece, you know, or one component of that umbrella of therapies that help people to feel better. I don't really believe in cures, because I don't think, how do I put it? It's not me. I think it's that there are tools that help people to enhance their functioning, and they eventually come in contact with an improved health. And so I feel that we've developed tools as human beings throughout history that have helped people, you know. And so I think cure is a tricky word, you know, because it's like, well, but I think that it takes two to tango. You know, you can have the most, you know, the best practitioner, the best doctor with all, you know, with incredible training. And you can have a person, you know, that has pain, for example. But in the end, if that person isn't necessarily looking at their diet, for example, which is a big factor, and, you know, or they're under a lot of stress, you know, there's only so much that particular body is going to improve in its functioning. I think when two people really sync up, or three or other practitioners with a person who's seeking treatment, the person also has an individual responsibility in their care and their outcome as well. And I think you can say that with anything in life, with any challenge. You know, if you're not ready to meet, or opportunity, I should say, if the person isn't necessarily fully there to meet it, then I mean, it's going to be helpful, but it may only go so far.
Right.
So I feel that we're all in this. Health is a process, and it's about learning about yourself each and every step of the way. Okay, so in my 20s, you know, I played rugby, for example. I did not.
I did.
One day I tried out, that was enough. And it's just, anyway.
They had cool trips and it got me away from the academy. So
The captain was
and then my grades suffered and then I didn't play rugby anymore.
Yeah, but amazing sport, right?
Oh, lots of fun.
It is amazing to watch, but no, I am completely, like the worst body type. I'll be done. I'll be in the ER in half an hour. So anyway, the long story short, I can't remember where I was going with that.
Taking two to tango, and
yeah,
you can play rugby in your 20s. Sorry.
Yeah, and so, but then in your 40s, you know, you're doing something different. You know, you may not want to play rugby. Your body might want to do different things, because at that point in time, you know, in your life, depending on all the experiences you've been through, what brings about health for a person is different. And so I think that living life is this beautiful process. And it's also this unfolding process where we get to learn about what are the therapies, or what are the ways in which we can enhance health. And I think it's up to each person too. Right. And I always feel like we should, you know, a curious mind, you know, didn't ever necessarily, or an open mind never, you know, I don't think it ever did any harm. I mean, parameters, but in terms of health and trying something, you can always try something, right? So I love what I do, because it's a blessing and an honor for me to watch people's lives unfold. And that's just how vast and how wonderful the depth, you know, of Chinese medicine, you know, can be for a person. But also the acupuncture is just so wonderful, you know. And it's not, I don't think it's painful. That's me. But I do acupuncture all day long, you know. Some people, if it's not your thing, needles, okay, then it's not your thing. That's totally okay. But there's herbs, you know, there's therapeutic movements too that can be very helpful. And in the end, you know, it's really just about helping a person to really feel a lot better.
Well, and in full disclosure, the needles, no, they don't hurt, except for the ones you did. You went deeper into the muscle, and it makes total sense. But the relief I felt immediately afterwards was absolutely worth that.
Yeah. Yeah. And
oh
when
my
we have trigger
goodness.
points or knots in a particular muscle because we've been moving a certain way.
Yep.
Again, that compensation pattern, you know, sometimes it's like there are different techniques. They say 3,000 to 5,000 years with Chinese medicine. Everybody likes to argue. Whatever. It's old. There are different techniques under the umbrella of acupuncture because it's been around. So yeah, obviously, you know, we've evolved as human beings in terms of our education and structure and how we communicate, how we can Zoom, right? 500 years ago, there was no Zoom. So same thing with acupuncture. It's not the same thing, you know, or the same way that it was practiced, you know, 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. There's different styles, many different styles and many different techniques. This is also why I love it so much, because it's never ending. So
that's so cool.
Also a little frustrating because they're like,
there's more.
There's more. But it's great. So I love it.
So has your clientele changed over the years? People who are coming in, or is it opening up? We're getting out, or is it you doing the education, or what? Have you noticed any changes?
I would say that probably a little bit both, because I think the more and more people are educated about complementary alternative therapies, the more curious they are, because we'll just use the example of pain, for example, because it's just something that we kind of all understand. Pain. When you're in pain, you really want to feel better. And there are a lot of people that don't really care what you call it, what it does, they just want help. So those are the people that are going to be on the forefront of seeking something to help them, you know, with their physical pain. And so I think that whether or not that was out of just education to people, or just because when you don't feel well, you'll do anything to feel better, you know.
Right.
And so you're going to want to find therapies or people that can help you. So I think, you know, when I moved to Spokane, for example, I was terrified. I didn't know it was soul. And so, besides my husband, you know,
Right.
or partner at the time, and so then partner, and so I was just like, oh my gosh, how are people going to, what are they going to think of me? Yeah, I just felt like I was like first day of school every day, just totally nervous, you know. But that wasn't the case, you know.
Mm.
And I think it's just like anything, you just meet people, and you know, for some people they just love it, and some people, you know, it's like anything.
Right.
And I just loved working with all the people I get to work with, you know. And some people I work with very short term because there's one specific thing, you know, and some people it's longer term, or they're in a job where it's very, very physically demanding, you know, so they need help to recuperate. So preventing, you know, further wear and tear on joints, this and that. So for example, Michael Phelps, you know, you know, probably heard of him. He utilized acupuncture so much. And I love that about him, that he gave a voice to our profession, because it really helped to enhance his recovery from workouts.
Okay.
So he was able, I mean, that man worked really hard, you know. And so it's really, acupuncture has been used in orthopedic acupuncture to enhance, basically enhance your performance. I mean, if you have improved circulation and less inflammation in your system, you're going to perform better, period.
Right. Yep.
And what's amazing is that it talks to your brain about doing it yourself. So how empowering is that? That's empowering. So you tap into your own system, right, to do that. I'm just the mechanic or the tool, you know, here, you know, with the little tools, but in the end, it's the person, you know, so who gets to do that with whatever they want, you know. So I loved Michael Phelps's story and his passion behind that, and saying, yeah, this really helps me, you know, to, you know, I'm not as sore, or I'm, you know, my workouts are fantastic, or after, you know, a competition or whatever, you know, he just prevented a lot of injury. So, yeah.
So with acupuncture, because I ask a lot of questions on the table, so you're working with the electrical system of the body, basically, and that stimulating the nerves, I mean, I'll let you speak to it probably better. With the,
keep going.
Go ahead. And then with the herbs, your support, how does that work with it?
Yes.
Like, it's very complementary.
Yeah.
I felt the difference, and you talked about the difference in just 2 months, which I think is quick.
Very, very quick. Well, and it's kind of like anything. I mean, 5,000 years ago, 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, they didn't have lab reports. They didn't have CAT scans. They didn't have MRIs. They had to figure out something. And so they developed these techniques, and they were really concerned with the emperor at the time. And they wanted him to live past 100, because the firstborn son was out fighting wars until the age of 50. Okay. So Chinese medicine was truly the medicine over in mainland China. You know, it was like, how do we, you know, we have to ward off infections. They didn't call it then, but in the literature, their books, you know. And if you look at the history, even with Europe, they were dealing with the same microbes, you could call it, but they just called it different things, you know. And so they kept the emperor alive past 100, which is a pretty big wow, right? And then when the Europeans came over, you know, into China, you know, they would say, oh, what's the one herb? I love it, the one herb, you know, for longevity, you know, for their king and queen. And so they would say, oh, okay, it's Renshen, you know, or it's ginseng, or this and that. But truly, I would say, yes, that's a beautiful herb, but Chinese medicine never really looks at just one thing. They look at, you know, the relationship between the herbs. Again, it's about the relationship with the herbs to one another, and how they work together, you know, for the overall, all of the systems to improve in functioning. So you always have to support digestion, adrenal functioning. Again, they didn't call it that back then. They call it different things. Improve the circulation, take inflammation out, boost the immune system. So you would get a formula of Chinese herbs that would address all of that. But how do they know which herbs to give a person?
Mm.
So that's where the pulse diagnosis comes in, where you might see in movies where they read the pulse.
Mm-hmm.
And that is basically like your particular, I mean, if you really want to speak loosely, lab report back then saying, oh, this and that. So they know which herbs to give the emperor, to support his health. Because when you got sick, I mean, you got sick, we didn't have penicillin back then, and we're really lucky, that we have penicillin. It's a great drug because it's been around and we know what it does,
Yep.
right?
Well, and I'm a skeptic, and when you did the pulse during one of you nailed everything that was going on, right there. Like,
I
big
have
skeptic here, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I have a dear friend of mine, and he's just so great. He teaches all over, and he says, bodies don't lie. He's just like, they just tell you in one patterning. So Chinese medicine looks at patterns. Oh, so how do we support that? So the Chinese herbs are there to facilitate how do we get the entire system, to improve with overall. And I say functioning because health is basically the absence of symptoms. I mean, you could look it up. There's many different definitions. We talk a lot about disease, but we don't really talk about what is health. I think Chinese medicine's aim is to say we see patterns, we figure out what are those patterns in relationship to one another, and how do we unravel those patterns so that the system, you have free-flowing nutrients everywhere, so everything's repairing. If you don't have someone knocking on the door's not going to open. So I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's what the pulse diagnosis would tell a practitioner. These are the herbs to use. These are the there's something happening with the neck region. I know need to address the neck, also, or there's an old knee injury. So they figured it out. I don't know how they did. But one of my main teachers, out of Los Angeles, he's from Taiwan, but he's been practicing over here, 20 something years. And he really honed in on this system. And so, and really just about how you can tell, with the pulse. The tongue is also an area, that you can tell different body systems, the ears as well. So they got really, really sophisticated around how do we figure out what's going on? Because obviously you can't give the same person, the same thing all the time as everyone else, because everyone's unique and different.
Yep.
As we found out with functional medicine, you can get a lab reporting and say, wow, you really shouldn't eat onions, or you should really eat onions, or that's just for example. So it really hones in on the individual and how to really honor that person's system as much as possible, which is why I love it so much. And yes, absolutely, disclaimer, Western medicine is fantastic. Obviously, both systems complement one another. And I think an empowered individual knows, okay, if you have an emergency, go to the hospital.
Right.
I mean, Chinese medicine, I'm not good at that. That's not my thing. I'm looking into lifestyle, nutrition, Chinese medicine, dietetics, how we manage stress, how do we help to reduce inflammation, how do we support the immune system, so you can be the most, wonderful feeling good person in your life and do things that you'd like to do. That's what I love to do. That's what I want to help people with. But if something runs over your leg, don't come see me. That's not my thing. It's not my specialty, but I know that.
Okay? If it's not healing, come see you.
Oh, what?
If it's not healing.
Yeah. Well,
after you saw the doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. So like
there's still pain,
cases, things like that. Yeah, absolutely. But it's like, you have something really a big deal, go to the hospital. That's not what I do, Right. And they're exceptional at that, and and Western medicine, even the pharmacology, it's exceptional. So it's, rather than looking at it this or that or better or worse, it's not that at all. It's really about empowering the person in their quest for health to understand, okay, we have all these wonderful resources, to improve. Basically the whole gist is, when people feel better, everything is better.
Right.
Society, relationships, people can do their best work when they're feeling good. Or better. Not
right.
saying that you can't do good work if you're not feeling well. It's just saying it becomes a lot easier. Did I answer your question?
You did. Well, no, I love it. You covered a bunch of different things. It's like, yeah, we can do things in the face of pain, but where there's still something that's taking up our energy that could have been focused towards what it is we want to create, or to be able to see something like, I'm surprised. It's amazing to me, because even with all the stuff that I know now and do, like, even if I'm just sick, how easily, like, nothing else matters, and being in that, like, depressed, woe is me, I'll never recover, right? Like, these just whatever thoughts go on of, like, it's like, okay, hold on, you're healing, it's good. but it's amazing how that can get hijacked really quickly.
It really does.
And then add chronic pain or all that stuff on it that we you talked about, that injury, the body's holding it. Yeah, and that's some of the work I do, is your body knew to brace itself. Let's spread it up into thirds to break it down and release. And there's a part of us that's, like, still in that protective mode. Yeah, it's super cool.
Which is a weird response, which is smart.
What's that?
We go through traumas, injuries. I mean, we have things happen to us, and the body tightens up for a reason. And it's really intelligent. Yeah. So, but again, it's teaching the nervous system, which is basically all the nerves that come out that release all these different chemical messengers, neurotransmitters, that talk about more inflammation or less. So we want to make sure that those pathways, are really saying, yes, repair this tissue. And so when I look at someone who's been through an auto accident, I'm one of them, and the learned response over years since then, it all matters. It just does, because the body's just like this beautiful map. They'll say, well, that happened so and so years ago. I'm like, yeah, but it is still something to consider. Because you might be walking in a certain way, even though it's not causing you pain. That compensation piece, is playing a role with your neck, possibly. But we'll just
well, and I'm surprised, because of flying the plane, we would sit a certain way because we did circles in one direction the whole time. And then coming back from Afghanistan, we wore a holster with a gun. So once, it doesn't even compare to some of the guys with the 50-pound, 60-pound packs, and stories I've heard of how their body is just, compensated for that. But it does stay. And years later, I'm still, like, tweaking it out. And I don't know, maybe you can, maybe it becomes a place where that body gets used to, okay, we'll just hold it here and we'll just keep cocking it back here. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, or even people who have to wear heavy belts for their job, like police officers, or even firemen that have to carry, when they get suited up, the heavy equipment that they have to carry. Truck drivers. I mean, gosh.
Right? Every driving like this.
Yeah, or sitting. Just even the act of sitting. And we do live in a culture right now where we are sitting far too much. And so I think that the muscle tissue, or the tissues of the body, are different than they were 50 or 60 years ago, because we were moving a lot more. We weren't, necessarily sitting at a desk as much. I mean, in part, this country was a farming country, or agriculturally, speaking, for quite some time. And so more and more of the, suburbia, or that development of people entering into an office space, we'll just use that very loosely, and desk work, I think, has really changed the way in which postural habits have formed, or how one of my teachers says, he just says it's different. When he was practicing in the 80s, versus now, he says the tissue, he's like, there's more adhesions, there's more this, because we're in one position.
Stagnation, right?
Yeah. It's like, so the tissue can become hardened because of that. Yeah. A form of stagnation. And not saying that farmers didn't have injuries or things like that. Right. It's just moving a lot less. So it's a different, like, type of body, I guess, that's walking around versus 50 or 60 years ago. And I would absolutely agree. I mean, my grandma was in the garden all the time, moving, and both of them, lived into their 96, 97.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Right. And I want to be moving, right? I want to be
they moved a lot. they also grew up in a culture or society that moved a lot, and it's not saying that you can't move a lot, but I think the more in which, and it's just walking. I mean, that's the best form of exercise also besides swimming, I think, because you're using a lot of muscles versus if you do like running, for example, that's, that uses primary muscles, but walking, I mean, you can just being active basically, and there's this saying, like, if you're not active, what happens?
Well, I love that you're saying that, because there's this mindset, and again, one of the ideas when I was talking to the functional nutritionist was, we don't learn how to take care of our bodies. We learn it from magazines, or like, here's this Michael Phelps, or like these phenoms who are doing things, and it's like, okay, I'm going to be like them, right? And I just was reading how, golfer Tiger Woods was asked, what would you tell, now in your mid 40s, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? And he's like, don't run, don't do the 6 miles. We didn't need to do that. We could just walk. And that was like, whoa,
that's
smokes.
Yes. I mean,
and one of the things,
he's got a knee injury or
right. I mean, because he's talking about it now of like this repetitive striking, and there are ways to run properly that you don't have those problems, but no one teaches us that, right? Like, I know I am not a great runner, but it helps with body mechanics, or hurts, or it's exasperated. So I think that's really cool. And wow, we don't have to beat ourselves up to experience health. And then you talked about, and I want to hit a little bit more on this, of, I've talked about anger, because a lot of times there's an idea that we hold it up here, right? Like frustration and anger up like a dog in hackles. But you keep saying, and I never really dug into it, anger is just one emotion.
It's or anger, or
I forget how you say it.
Energy that has to just move.
Energy that has to move. It's
kind of stuck. And so now, granted, how a person works with that is different. But if someone feels really angry, it's like it's almost like you want to move, because it kind of billows up. And Chinese medicine does talk about the different emotions and how they're really associated with health of certain organ systems. So, for example, if you're really sad, you might, you feel it in your lungs. Lungs are a lot of grief. Kidneys, or I would say we're talking about more like kidney adrenal. It's more about fear, or that adrenaline. That's the opposite. So there's always kind of this opposite. They talk about joy affects the heart, but they say too much joy can really affect the heart. So, for example, there was a gentleman who won the lottery, and he was so happy he had a heart attack and died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No one ever talks about that side of the too much, because I agree, there's like a balance. Not like we're meant to be neutral, but there's a homeostasis of emotions through life, and we're meant to experience all of it. But no one ever talks about, I just want to feel happy all the time. Like, I don't know that works. So
it's a good question.
I'm excited you brought that up.
Well, and I think that what Chinese medicine really says is that, again, we're not separate, from our body versus our mind, and our emotions can greatly influence how we feel and our health, and play a role with that. And I that's why I love it so much, is because it really does honor that, and so for example, we might know what it's like to feel angry. It's like something where you want to do something about it, and so I think it's, each emotion has that spectrum of grief. There's a spectrum of grief. There's a spectrum of anger, and it's just different forms of, literally, if you want to put it, everything is, basically electrons, things communicating. So if you think about it, it's just your choice what you want to do with it. And it's not that you definitely don't want to necessarily go through life like having no affect or just being neutral to everything. You just don't want it to take a hold of you physically, so you can process something out here in the periphery, but Chinese medicine greatly influence whether or not something is always inside of you, like that anger, right? So
Right.
you can process your anger much more easily, meaning, it's not contained in your body. You can process it, either with it's something that you can work with more externally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we always look at how we don't want that to influence everything that a body is feeling all the time, because you have too much of an emotion, it does play a role. It just does over time.
Right.
You look at people who've been struck by grief, horrible things that happen to people, and how over time, prolonged grief like that, if the person is unable to necessarily process it, it can really affect their health. Not everyone,
Right.
but it really can. So.
Yep. Well, and I think I like the idea that they're meant to be expressed, right? And so we hold it in. And for anger, I would imagine going for a walk or doing something to
Yes.
breathe and move the
To move
energy.
it
And,
out. Mm-hmm.
and then you get to bring in the lymph system and like move these toxins and so forth. Drink water.
Yeah. Yeah, or even, breathing exercises, for example. I mean, wherever the breath goes, the mind follows.
Mm.
So if you do, let's say you're feeling really upset, for example, or really sad, there's different exercises for the breath that is part of Chinese medicine and in yoga or in many different types of, therapies, where you would count, you'll do of something. And I kid you not, it's so true. Wherever the breath goes, the mind follows. So you can quickly change, something, by incorporating the breath. If someone's really stressed, it's right here, in the scaling muscles or in the neck muscles. It's not necessarily down here in the lungs per se.
Mm.
We always want to be breathing, generally speaking, deeper.
Right.
So we're not so tight. We come from a culture right now where it's all about neck pain, and we have phones like this. So we're shortening these muscles here. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of demands that we're not used to. It's all about time, all about demands, meeting this, meeting that. There's a lot of this, but if we can incorporate as a society to teach people different skills, we can greatly influence. I always say to my patients, I can't change what happens to you, but I can greatly in your life, your decisions, those are yours, but what I can do is I can greatly help to influence how your body, works with that. And I think people get that. Oh, okay. Yeah. So, it's up to you, your decisions in your life, but my passion or my job is to help so that it's not always contained. So you always have that beautiful circulation. You always have those nutrients. You're in repair mode,
So when the world opens up, where are you going to visit?
I'd like to see my mom.
Score 1 for daughter points.
And my dad. Yeah, my stepdad. I like to see my family.
Your parents. Okay.
Yes, that's been really challenging. It's nice, you can see them, but it's not the same.
Right.
I'd really like family. Mm-hmm.
If you could all go on vacation together or go visit in the world, like what's
anywhere?
the next place in the world that you would like to go to?
I'd love to go to Portugal.
Oh, how come?
Well, my husband, he's half Portuguese, so he has actually he's American, but like he has one, I believe, living relative in Portugal. Okay. So, and he comes from the Azore Islands.
Yes.
The Azores. I don't know how you pronounce it, but he's always wanted to go, to Portugal and to be there and learn that. And I'd love to share that with him. And cool. And he has 3 brothers, and they all like to go. So I think that would be a really meaningful trip, is to see that. And I've heard wonderful things about Portugal. So, and it's interesting. It's like, do you do the mainland Portugal, because the Azore Islands are pretty far out,
far away? Yep.
And when I like to travel, I like to really go and be there. Meaning, I've traveled with my father before, where it was like tour after tour after tour after, and it was exhausting. So I think a beautiful blend, that's how he rolls. It's totally fine. I think a beautiful blend, is, you go on your tour, which I love, history, I'm at, but then also just to like be there in a place. And right. What is it like, what do the people eat, you know, for a typical meal, or, just a couple of days, just kind of like watching,
Yep.
just there. It's such a blessing to be able to travel. How about you?
Well, I have been to the Azores. I've flown into the Azores, and it's
You
incredible.
have?
It is probably one of my favorite places that nobody talks about, and but it's also an island, so it's like you can do everything. And
There's 6 or 7.
yep.
Fayal, I think it's Fayal. It's like there's the Blue Island, and then so it's named after kind of, it's like a particular flower for each island.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
See, I did not learn this.
So Jay's, my husband basically said, "Oh, I'm from the Blue Island," and I said, "Okay, what's that?" So there's a blue flower that grows.
Okay.
So each island has, I guess, I don't know all the details. Well, that is wonderful that you've been there. Every person I've met who's been there has said it's
gorgeous. It's beautiful. But it's hard the history and all the things that mainland Portugal has too, right? Like,
how do you do it?
How do you do it?
I know.
So it sounds like it'll be fun no matter what.
Yes. I said, well, I would hate to do like 10 days in both places, because that sounds just like too much for me. Like, I just don't necessarily want to be, I don't like to rush too much, when I go. Yep. So, but I'm really excited to go there, because I think it'd be neat also to see them, see him and just coming into connection of something that's a part of his history. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
And you asked me, actually, I don't know. I've been really lucky. I've gotten to travel, and Nepal was one of my favorite, like, 2-day trips that I would just, like, even the dog sat there with the legs crossed, like in a Zen kind of place. So, like,
yes. Oh, when were you in Nepal?
2014, September. Yeah.
Wow.
So we got to fly in a guard unit of dentists and doctors. So we dropped them off. They went up in the backcountry, Kill Mountain. Well, they're not hills. They're mountains. Yeah. And then we picked them up. So it was really cool to.
Oh, wow.
It was just awesome. It was a really, really great experience.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I was there in 2000 and I think I was there 2001.
Wow. And so we were lucky enough not to really eat something to, like.
Yeah.
Because you still had to fly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I lived with a family, so it was different, but, the safest thing to eat, I mean, at the time that I was there for a Westerner, because it's just different microbes all the time. Yep. But safest thing to eat really was like a pizza or or something in a package. Because you're trekking up, and you get dysentery, your trip's over.
Right. Same.
So, and so it's a lot easier to eat a cracker out of a box.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but the food there is phenomenal. A lot of curries, rice and what they call dal bhat, which is like the lentils and wonderful people. So
and the countryside, I mean, the Mother Nature is just incredible.
Yes. And so, it's interesting. If you look at a cross section of Nepal, you have below sea level, and then you have the tallest mountain in the world.
Oh, no kidding.
Country. So the southern part of Nepal, it's called the Terai, is tropical. And the reason why Nepal, according to my knowledge, hasn't been colonized by any European, country, because the Terai, there was all this malaria, and so getting through the actual tropical part, it's really hot, right? And getting up through like parts of India into Nepal, it was just, I mean, people are just sick, So that's what I was told when I lived there. So yeah, but Nepal is really an amazing place. Again, I haven't been there, but that's wonderful that you were there, like just years ago.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I want.
I left right before the Maoists took over.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the teachers at the time, when I was studying over there, I lost contact. So, I mean, I don't know, but I think about them. So, yeah.
So one of the things that, because I love systems too. So as listening to your story weave through, like, you have always been following your path, like the things that you knew, like I'm going to work with my hands, help people. Looking back and realizing how it almost sounds like way serendipitous everything was, or just door closes, door opens. What would you tell your 20-year-old self? Or did you just enjoy life anyway? But I mean, is there something that some wisdom you could pass?
Probably chill out, you know. You'll be fine, and it'll all work out, you know. Because I think it wasn't traditional what I was doing, and I was also very frustrated, you know, like because it seemed like everybody kind of knew in their 20s what they were doing with their life, and I was following it, but it wasn't this set profession. And so I think there was just this underlying like piece of frustration, you know, like, why can't I be like Sally who's got it figured out, you know, or this and that, you know. I wanted to make my parents really proud, you know, also, you know, that I had gone to college and done all these things, and that I, you know, had something to show for that. But it was all these things that just kind of synced up, you know, and it was really just that the accident, and then, you know, the, you know, mugging at gunpoint, you know, incident. And so all these things, that was after, you know, college, that just kind of just pushed me in this, I allowed it, you know, and I just said, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do now. But it all made sense. Now when I look at it, you know, look back, I was always studying something that was herbal medicine related, health related, you know, something Western sciencey, you know, doing something. I just hadn't had that, like, that degree formed yet, you know. And so I would just say, just, you know, enjoy the ride. It's all going to work out. I mean, and humans, welcome to being human. I mean, I don't think like it just ends. It's not like, and how are people really supposed to know anyway? I think about it, you know, like, there's a lot of pressure on young people. It doesn't mean like this is anything that defines you, you know. And I think you might, some of the most wonderful people I've ever met have done many different things, you know, and they did fine in their life. So I think it was just also working with my paradigms of what was success and what wasn't. And
how did you break those paradigms?
Oh, I have no idea. I think
or they just did it for you because it was like,
I think I was just like, I'm doing this,
nice.
You know, and I just did it, you know, and then it just all worked out. And when I graduated from Chinese medicine school, I was really nervous, you know, like, I mean, starting up a practice.
Right. Yep.
Oh, that's terrible. They don't teach you that. I mean, they really don't. And a lot of other providers I asked them, they're like, no, you know, I didn't learn that. And unless you're a medical doctor, I mean, you basically, you have your job set for you. I mean, you can go work at a hospital or at a clinic, but as a complementary alternative provider, practitioner, that's a different story. And that's terrifying, you know, because it's, for me, it was terrifying.
Right.
I mean, I didn't even know what a UBI number was, you know, or that's like your like business identification number for wherever you're practicing. And I didn't know any of that stuff, you know.
Well, it's cool that you're talking about that, like, you know, in an exciting adventure way, because I don't think we know what's going to happen after this whole experience we just had with lockdown and stuff. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of that unknown ways that we thought our lives were headed are going to start changing. And
yes, very much so.
I look at my life and realize how, for me and my type and who I am, I was fortunate to have a goal of wanting to fly, because it kept me in my experimental stage of, okay, let's not get too far in trouble, right? Like, you have this goal, how badly do you want it? And then now when I'm older and wiser, it's just gone the other way, which is just kind of like you're talking about. Oh, I've been always doing things for this, but now I have free reign. What do you want to do with it? It's so I'm like living life in reverse, I guess, of like, oh, there's too many choices.
There's a lot of choices,
but it's fun.
Yeah,
watching where your natural talents are leading you.
Yes, and I very blessed to live in a time in history where I can explore that, or I can run a clinic. I can open up a clinic or open up a business. So I feel really fortunate that I'm in a place where I can do that, you know, as a person, you know, as a citizen, to say, oh my gosh, I'd like to create this or do this, and then you do it.
Yep.
That's an amazing privilege to have, you know, to be able to work for yourself, you know, and to create something. I mean, I thought about that. I said, wow, I get to study something, you know, and get a license for it, and I get to open a clinic. That's it. I mean, take away all the fears of failure and all those things and all that stuff. But just the fact that I have the opportunity to do it if I'd like to.
That's
And
so cool.
maybe I'm, you know, 100 years ago, I think that was a different story. So.
Really? That's super cool.
Probably. You know, I don't think that we necessarily think about that as human beings or as American citizens, the opportunities that that if you want to create, I think that's still here in this country, that if you'd like to do something and you have an idea, you can open up a business. I mean, I guess anyone can.
Yep.
You just have to apply. You get your UBI number. Okay. then the other parts are the other pieces too, you know, like, oh, and you have to have customers and this and that. But it's, you know, it's that American dream part, you know, and I think I never really knew that until I actually was doing it. Like, wow, like I'm doing this and I'm putting my name out there, and that's terrifying, you know. And
it's so cool.
It's official, you know. I've got my business license, I've got my provider license. Like that's, oh, you know,
that's so cool. And now I understand, because a couple of days ago I got this idea, you're going to be talking about this, and it's like, how is this coming in? And it was about spirit. And so what do you know in your work, and what is the human spirit, and how have you seen that unleashed, or like what does that mean to you? I think it's within us. I love the human spirit, and I mean, it takes a lot of courage to jump in and open up a practice and be like, come people.
I start off small.
Yep.
Really small. I wish I knew how to answer that question. I think the human spirit is the most beautiful thing, you know, and how you see one person, you know, who can influence so many people in a positive way, you know, like humanitarians that have come before us, or who are also alive now, you know, doing things for leaving the world a better place, you know, than when they came into this world. And so I think the human spirit, I don't know, it was funny because people asked me and I said, I don't know, I just did it. And I just said, okay, this is what you do. Okay, check, check the box. And I also had some colleagues, you know, that I was able to ask, okay, what did you do? Like, how do you do this? You know, that had been in private practice before me. So I was helped in many ways, you know, thank you, because it's overwhelming, you know, and they don't, again, nobody tells you, oh yeah, you're supposed to have this form, or you're supposed to do this. You pay your tax, you pay your quarterly taxes, and you pay, I mean, you know, you know, so, but I think the human spirit is what keeps us going, and it's what makes us feel alive. And I think that each person has that capacity to engage in that conversation with themselves, and, you know, in their life, if they choose to, you know, how do I, and I was on a walk this morning with a friend of mine, and I said, you know, I want more humanitarians. I want to see more people asking the question, how do I leave this, what is my legacy, or how do I leave this planet better than when I first came into it? How do I help people? You know, how do I, you know, help our local communities, you know, because I think, I'm hoping that the shift out of this whole stay-at-home COVID-19 era piece is really going to bring people back to, you know, to looking at, well, what is meaningful for me? And I think when you have a challenge, and when you have anytime a human being is faced with something that's extremely hard, that no matter what, you can't not think about that question sometimes, like, what's going on here, or where's my life going to be in 6 months, and how was I living my life before? You know, some people may not have they may not be asking that question yet, but I hope at least that people are saying, well, how can I make this world a better place? You know,
It's so cool because that questioning works on the big picture as well as that individual picture. How do I make my life better?
Because it's always been the individual that has changed the world. You know, it, at least in human history, you know, for good or for bad. But I'm hoping that, you know, the gift of looking at what is however we define what is being a humanitarian or philanthropist or whatever it is, how do you contribute? You know, and I think that is what really made me look at this whole piece, you know, of the COVID-19, is looking at, well, how do we help one another in a way that's really meaningful? You know, how can I, as a provider, you know, help each person? You know, what's the bigger goal here? You know, and with my work, but also when I'm not at work, like, what would I like to see? You know, to contribute, you know, to a community. You know, and so those are the things that I've been asking myself. I hope that, you know, as human beings, we get to have that conversation with ourselves sometime. So.
That's so cool. I love that, because I look at all the things going on. It's like, what is my role, right? With my unique abilities and designs, what is my role in asking the same kind of questions? How do I serve? How do I move through this? That's so cool. As we're wrapping up, are there any questions or anything you'd like to bring out that we didn't cover?
Gosh. Such a wonderful conversation, you know, and I really appreciate that you're giving me the opportunity to share.
Yeah.
And I hope that people out there who get to listen to your podcast and get to find, you know, bits and pieces from the people that you get to interview with that really help them. You know, we all need, as human beings, we all need support. And we all need help to shed our light in any which way to make the world a better place. And so thank you for providing such a platform for that.
You're welcome. So I always ask one question at the end, and I even ask it of myself on my solo. What is something that surprises and delights you about yourself?
Oh, I love this. So I love it when I catch myself worrying about something, and then I work to transcend it. And so before I would just worry. And then of course, you know, at turning almost 41, I've said, you know, I don't think this is serving me. And how do I transcend that? You know, how do I work with that? Because it surprises me. I love it because the surprise is the awareness that I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. So with the surprise and the awareness, it delights me because I feel empowered to do something about it instead of worrying, to really help to move that out, like we've talked before, but also to say, what's the gift behind this? What's the gift behind this worry? What's the gift behind this challenge? What can I do to make a positive impact for myself as a person, as a provider, but also what is the gift behind this challenge that I'm having, and how can I grow? How can I be a better person because of it? And I think through my life coming to this time, it's been wonderful to have the awareness to look at it in that way so that I can shift. And that's been really, really wonderful. It doesn't mean that it's hard. It doesn't mean that it's easy. It just means that it is. So I'm just having the awareness for it. So another thing that surprises me is that I don't know. I'm surprised. You should probably ask my husband.
Well, or maybe you could just go with delights you about yourself.
Delights me. I love that I have really good humor, you know, and that I like to find, it's just important to laugh. And I love that I'm still able to laugh and have fun. And, you'll hear my laugh. People say the laugh, because life is challenging.
Yep.
And you also got to laugh through it, and some of life is just sometimes ridiculous. Human beings we're all ridiculous.
Right.
We're stuck in our ability to like look at that and laugh and be like, oh, it's just that, and maybe that's the beauty of getting older and having all these wonderful experiences, or like, yeah, I did that before, but no, I'm not gonna do that way. I've learned.
Right.
I feel like I can bang the drum and be like, I've learned, I've had that. And that's the beauty of like having that, that depth, of those experiences, and saying, no, I choose, I don't have to do that way. So I feel, I'm delighted in the fact that I feel as a person, I'm not having as, I'm enjoying things. It doesn't mean that life still isn't hard. I'm enjoying this. I don't know. I just know there might be more pandemics. There might not. I have no idea. But each day is truly this incredible blessing, that I get to wake up and I get to work with people. And I just love that. I get to work with people, and because I love what I do. And I really enjoy, I love working with people, so.
That's so cool.
I don't know if I answered that well, but
there's no wrong answer. So, and I completely am thankful that you followed this path too. Just in my own relief of pain or feeling the system coming back into wholeness, that's so cool. And you can do it in such a way that's just so easily, I don't know, educational and simple and fun. Like, you laugh during sessions, not at anyone, just because you get joy out of it. That's so fun. How do we find you?
Well, good question. You can call me, or I have a website. Okay. It's emilyfarishacupuncture.com, and I'll spell it out because there's always one T, one R, one E, one C. So it's EMILY, and then Farish is F like Frank, ARISH, acupuncture, ACUPUNCTURE.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Is there anything you'd like that we should know?
No. I was gonna say, I love animals.
Can you do acupuncture on animals?
Well,
not
me. I can do
people.
Yes. Veterinarians can. I do acupuncture on my cat. So, but he's my cat, Right. So if he's like, he'll just go to sleep, this there. But no, I don't do. I don't. I'd have to have a veterinarian license. But my cat, yes, he enjoys it.
Cool. I was a lucky cat.
He's a lucky cat. He has no idea how lucky he is. He's a nice life.
Right. Well, thank you so much for saying yes to this conversation and taking a chance of talking about what you do, and sharing your experience and wisdom.
Thank you. Well, it's an honor to be with you, and for everyone out there, thank you so much. Truly, just providing me the opportunity to share. Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.